do we assess our public spaces? Let's talk indicators and community mapping. So, perhaps you're required to come up with a few indicators. Well, we have examples of how to use indicators and how community maps can help us too. We know that local public spaces are a wider indicator of the well-being of cities all over the world. And once we start paying attention, we can see how many indicators are easily visible in our daily life. We can see how so many features of urban design shape our day-to-day experiences and social interactions. Let's check in with Miss Owl, who just taught a lesson on the topic. As Miss Owl explained to her class, indicators help to unpack big ideas and make them specific so we can assess, measure, and plan. They tell us, what does change look like in practice? And how do we assess change? How do we measure it? We can use the context of public space to think about indicators as a checklist. A checklist for assessing how livable, how friendly our built environment is include amount of access, for example, by public transport or walking and biking, level of safety and comfort, such as lighted spaces, cleanliness, available seating for various ages, degree of community building, for example, child-friendly spaces, presence of public art, activities suitable to a wide range of ages and backgrounds. At Miss Owl's next class, students began reflecting on how the surrounding environment affects their own daily living patterns and communal life, and they started sharing stories. The porcupine spoke of the time he was so embarrassed and had to sit by himself on the train so that he wouldn't injure other riders. The giraffe recalled his disappointment when he realized he was too tall to play with the swings on the playground. The sheep happily reported on a walk she had taken with her grandmother and how grateful they were to find a park bench to rest by the lake. The owl spoke of a lovely outing to a local park that unfortunately was marred by an inordinate amount of litter. The cow and the frog hoped to find a playground where they could play together. The last one only offered a seesaw, and that was not a good idea. The ducks remembered when they got stuck in a muddy puddle near the city gardens and how there wasn't a place to wash their webbed feet. The elephant recalled the hazard when walking through the park with friends one late afternoon, where it was very slippery and not well lit at all. The kangaroo, on the other hand, spoke fondly of his neighborhood sidewalks with ramps, so helpful when he tired of carrying the kangaroo cub and used the stroller. And lastly, the bunny recalled the food stand at the botanical gardens and her relief of being able to buy extra snacks for her kids. Miss Owl saw that the students were getting used to indicators, and she then introduced the idea of placemaking. Placemaking helps us see that we make our built environment, and as such, we can also edit this environment and reinvent it if needed. Miss Owl decided it was time to get everyone outside, have a class picnic, and review the checklist in more detail with sample quantitative and qualitative indicators that help us see how public space shapes our quality of life. What would be indicators of an accessible public space? Quantitative: number of accessible playgrounds for those with special needs. Percentage of population with transportation access to public spaces. Number of pedestrian walkways to public spaces. Qualitative: degree of comfort level with approaching public spaces by foot or bike. What would be indicators of safety and comfort of the public space? Qualitative: percentage of pedestrian traffic at all hours of the day, number of options for seating in sun or shaded areas, number of lighted spaces, percentage of space covered with litter. Qualitative: reported level of perceived sense of safety among residents in going to the public space, day or night. What would be indicators of active community building for a public space? Quantitative: percentage of activities that are regularly used at various times, number of types of activities that are occurring, percentage of users coming from a mix of ages and backgrounds. Qualitative: degree of reported social interaction among various populations within the public space. Miss Owl knew it was time for a field trip. It would be a helpful way to think more about community planning. To the beach! And as soon as the students arrived, they saw indicators everywhere. Number of crosswalks to access the public beach. Percentage of options for seating, conveniently located offering sun or shade. Number of places available for washing webbed feet. Reported ease of use with playground facilities for those of different abilities, interests, and size. Number of locations for throwing away trash or recyclables. Percentage of area offering lighted access to the beach. Number of water spots for all kinds of beings. Degree of comfort in finding communal space to enjoy as a group. And on and on and on. Fully inspired, the students got back home and decided it was time to engage with local residents on the topic. Miss Owl and the students invited everyone to a picnic to have some food and to begin to have conversations about the role we each have in shaping the built environment. To ask questions such as, how do we define placemaking for ourselves? What does it mean for us to build a greater sense of ownership about our local public spaces? What do our public spaces signal to everyone? Who are we inviting to be a part of public life? And this is where we are now, but where do we want to be? It was time to let these questions spark imagination. Then they all decided the next step was to draw a community map. Community maps help us to see the link of how public space shapes who becomes visible in the public sphere. Generate discussions about the built environment and how it affects us as individuals and as a collective. Rethink the role we each play, empowering us to identify issues of concern. And a few key steps: map the designated public space, indicate its main features, invite everyone to add their own perceptions of the space, show where and how often individuals gather and which activities they engage in. Then let the conversations begin. We can see how the idea of indicators fits in, allowing us to assess these topics in a more concrete way. We can also see how community maps help us to think creatively, to consider how each of us shape the texture of our surrounding environment. We can use these types of tools to help us rethink all that is possible.